If you've ever struggled drawing things that feel three-dimensional, cross contours could be a game changer for you. They're super helpful for constructing forms, shading details, and they help you get better at visualizing your drawings in 3D. In this video, I'm gonna break down exactly how they work and help you avoid some of the common mistakes. So what is cross contour and why is it important? We know that boxes are made of planes, but what if the thing we want to draw is organic or more complicated than a box? The good news is that we can apply this concept of planes onto any form. Now, I don't mean to actually draw all these little planes, but we need to start trying to imagine them. Imagine this wireframe wrapping around the form. It takes some time to train your mind to switch from thinking about contour, or the outlines, to thinking about cross contours, or the forms. The goal is to imagine the form and then draw a few key cross contours that help communicate that form. If the idea of imagining an entire 3D wireframe sounds intimidating or impossible to you right now, that's okay. That's the goal, eventually. For now, you can start by imagining one cross contour line at a time. You pick a spot and imagine an ant trail. If a colony of ants marched across this form, what would that trail look like? So let's draw a sausage. The contour outline doesn't tell us much about the 3D qualities of this sausage. The little knots on the end help, but we assume that the sausage is cylindrical only by context. You already know what a sausage looks like. But if you're drawing something a little more complicated or new to the viewer, you want to describe the 3D qualities of a form. So an ellipse as a cross contour creates the illusion that this sausage has thickness and that it's a rounded thickness, like a cylinder. But what if it's a banana? We need to show these hard edges. Without them, it doesn't look like a banana, more like a croissant or a potato. The way we describe the form on the inside can be really important. And it becomes even more important when we're drawing something more complicated than a banana, like a face or a torso. Let's talk about spacing. How far apart should we draw these cross contour lines? I typically like to draw 1 to 3 cross contour lines per chunk of a form. It depends on the size on the page and how much the form changes throughout. The purpose of the cross contour line is to describe the form at that slice. So on this section of the forearm, I might do 2 cross contour lines. One at the wrist, which is a little bit more boxy and bony, so that the top is flatter, the side is flatter, and it'll have sharper corners like a box. And then as I get towards the meaty area, this will be a little bit more rounded, like a cylinder. There's another thing to keep in mind. The spacing relationships can actually indicate some foreshortening. So if we look at like a roly-poly from side view, the little segments on the roly-poly are pretty evenly spaced out. But if we look at it from a point of view like from over here, what this person would see is that these measurements are getting smaller up here. You see that? So because when you look at it from here, this plane is slanted away and you're only seeing a little piece of it. These planes are foreshortened. The planes that we're looking directly at are gonna be the largest. Now, cross contours don't have to indicate these even segments throughout a form, but when we're trying to show foreshortening, we can use that spacing to inform the viewer that, hey, up in here, this is going away from us and the spacing is closer. For example, let's draw this roly-poly from a 3/4 angle. Right, so same roly-poly, but now instead of looking at it from the side, we kind of turned and we're seeing mostly this front bottom part and a little bit of the side, and this whole part is moving away from us. And so these parts are gonna have these segments that are pretty close to us, although it's going down a little bit here. And then as it goes up, it's starting to tilt away from us. And so this plane or the space between these two cross contour lines is going to be a little bit smaller. And then in here, it's going to be even smaller than that because it's rotated even more away from us. And that keeps going. So I can use these distances to show that, hey, this is going away from us, but these are facing us. And you can see how that spacing really does communicate some depth. Now, what about the curviness? So we know that the shape that we use for the cross contour describes the form. With the banana, we saw that it had some sharp edges. The sausage had an ellipse. But not every ellipse is the same. Some curves are gonna be very round, some are gonna be a little bit flatter. So how do we decide how curvy to make it? Well, there's two things to keep in mind. Let's say we're drawing a fish. All right, we're gonna simplify this fish. It's just gonna be a fish that looks like this. Okay, and this fish is it's not a perfect side view. It's kind of facing slightly towards us. We got the eyeball. Yay, there's a little fishy. Now, if I draw an ellipse that's kind of flat, like this, I'm describing a pretty flat fish. Clearly, that's kind of obvious, right? If I draw another fish, pretty much the same angle, but for this fish, I kind of round it out more, or maybe even put a little bit of a corner. You know, that indicates that this fish is fatter in this middle part. So when you're drawing these cross contour lines, you can't just say, oh, it's round, so I'm just gonna put some ellipse there. You really have to think about the curviness of the ellipse. So flat fish versus round fish, that's one thing. But then also the orientation of the fish will make a difference in how curvy that line should be. So if I draw this rounder, fatter fish straight on, looking directly at us, it's probably gonna look something like this, with the little eyes and mouth, right? And so this curve is itself the cross contour line, right? It's very wide. But if I was to draw this fish from perfect side view, then we're actually going to be seeing straight lines down, because you need a little bit of that rotation for these to be able to go around. It's just like how when you're looking directly at a cylinder, you don't see the caps, the ellipses on the ends. They're just straight lines down. So everything in between is going to go from a straight line to a very rounded part. So it just depends on how much are you looking at it straight on to see the widest belly versus how much are you looking at it from the side and you're just kind of seeing a straight line. And it just depends on where you are in that orientation. Now let's look at the same concept, but with a macaroni, right? So let's say we've got a shape like this, and we're looking at it from here or from here. And let's see what those two orientations will look like. So if we're looking at it from here, we're just seeing this curve, the middle part will be a little bit bigger, right? Because it's closer to us than the outsides. And then the outsides, they're not gonna be closed off because this is rounded. So what we're seeing here is actually a circle going away from us. In the middle, that macaroni will be pretty much just straight up and down. And when you draw cross contour lines, you pretty much never will draw a straight cross contour. It's kind of pointless. Instead, what you'll do is you'll show the cross contours around that area. You could do it either really close, or if you're trying to show distances like we did here, you might actually just show a bigger distance in here and say, well, it's a little bit flatter here and here. And then as it goes away, it's gonna get rounder, it's gonna get closer to this perfect circle, and it's gonna start getting closer and closer. The same thing on this side. So you can see all these things happening at the same time. You got the distances getting shorter and shorter, and the amount of curviness getting rounder and rounder. I mean, this is really just a tube with curves on it, but you can kind of feel that it's rounded. Now let's look at, well, what happens when you look at it from this other side? Well, now this middle part is farther away, so that's going to be smaller. So instead, I'm going to curve these lines this way. And then again, these parts are perfect circles because they're pretty much just facing directly at us. In the middle, it's straight up and down, but again, we rarely draw that because it doesn't really describe the form. It kind of implies that it's flat, but it's not actually flat. It's a round macaroni, so it's kind of counterproductive. But now, as we are moving this way, so just like on the other side, as I go to the ends, the cross contour lines are going to get rounder and rounder and closer together. But the difference here is that the direction is different. Well, let's do another example of curved direction, but this time with a more organic blobby form. Let's say I have this part of my blob going away, and then I have this part of my blob going towards us. I've chosen with this blob to put my overlap here, this way. So I'm overlapping this form over this form. And by making that decision, I've implied that this is going towards us. And if it's going towards us, that means we're seeing this side of the plane. And that means that we're going to be seeing the curves going this way. I'm making them a little bit tighter here, kind of implying that they're also kind of curving away from us just a little bit. This form is moving downward more here and straight out this way more here. And also, it's just moving away from us, and so the distances will get smaller and smaller just because they're getting farther away. And then even right here, we can add a cross contour, which is going to be smaller because this form over here gets smaller. So this cross contour over here will go around, much smaller. Now let's draw that exact same blob, or as close as I can get it. But this time, let's overlap the other side. So I'm going to say this one is actually now in front. So you can see just with the overlap, we immediately get a totally different illusion. Now it seems like, oh, okay, we're actually seeing this top part, and this is going away from us. So a cross contour line going this way would actually not make sense anymore. It would not really describe the form properly. So now we have to imagine what the cross contours would look like when this form is coming at us. And if I think, okay, well, the tip is maybe right here, and this is coming right at us, and so these might be close together. And then as it comes out here, it actually gets more far apart and flatter because we're kind of looking straight down, almost straight down at this thing. Maybe another one over here. So very different cross contour lines on the same contour, right? The contour is the outside, the outer lines, but just by changing the overlap, our cross contour within changes quite a bit. Another way to think of it is as a slinky. If you have one, move it around and observe how the spacing and the curviness change. And don't be lazy with the ends. Now here's a really important tip. Don't be lazy with the ends. Don't be lazy with these parts. You gotta remember that these lines have to wrap all the way around. This goes around to the other side, and it keeps going. Right? If we had X-ray vision, we would see that this goes around, comes back, and then wraps back around this way. So these parts at the very ends are gonna get really curvy because they're going up, 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 and then very suddenly they're going left and then down within a very small distance. So the ends are usually gonna have the most curve, and the mistake most people make is they actually make the ends the flattest parts. They try to add the curvature right in the middle, and then they flatten the ends. And so what you end up getting, let's say you have a form like this, and you're trying to show that this is rounded, and you do this, and you come to a corner right in here, what you're showing is that this is a flat form. if we were to look at it from this point, you're showing that this is like a football, that it's got flat corners. Because you're implying that it's up and then it suddenly has to go back down, right? It's up and then suddenly back down. If you wanted to show that it's slowly wrapping around, you have to put this little piece right here. And then at the bottom, same thing. And the way to train yourself to think about those ends is to either ghost it in all the way around, make that full motion with your arm, or lightly actually draw a line all the way around, but make sure it's light so that it doesn't distract from the actual lines that are in front. Or just draw a little bit, just a little piece. Don't draw this back part in the middle. Just go back a little bit, just a little tail wrapping around. It doesn't distract with all this back stuff in here, but it's enough to show. Again, let's say that you got this. This is enough to show that it's wrapping around, but you don't have all that stuff in here to distract. But either way, just make sure you're not doing this. That's bad. No. We can have contours around all 3 axes. So far I've drawn contours around the longest part, just like along the length of a form, but you can actually show cross contour lines along any of the 3 axes, or all 3 if you want to be really detailed with it. So for example, we can show an ant marching along this way. So if I know that the center point is here, that's kind of the beginning of the ant. This ant will crawl around and then back, and then we won't see that ant anymore. Same thing here. This ant will go around and we don't see the side anymore. And it goes around and then suddenly over here comes back around and now we can see that ant again. And what that shows, this little trail, it shows that we're seeing the side plane here and we're seeing the other side plane here. So this cross contour line does actually inform us of a really important piece of information. And then of course we could show the top running down and then, under the bottom we won't see it anymore. So again, this ant going downward will wrap around this way. And then upward will wrap around this way and then turn suddenly and then down. And so now you have this really kind of very 3-dimensional wireframe around this blob. Let's do the same thing on this one. This comes around, goes flat, and then suddenly, looks like there's a very sudden turn, and around again. And then here on the side, we're seeing just a little bit of this side. And so this side line, side cross contour will be over here. And then kind of straight down actually in here. Like this. And then none of the back actually we're gonna see because it's around the back here, and then comes around over here. Okay, center lines. Some things are gonna have an obvious center line, like right down here on the face, running down the middle of the torso, and sometimes these center lines are a great place to show gesture, like in the motion of the torso. But sometimes it's an opportunity to think of the form with a cross contour. Either way, a center line's placement and curviness is useful to show the orientation of the form. Remember how earlier in the course, Aaron Blaise showed that center line on a sphere for a round bear head. The center line is a good trick and it's really easy to understand, and it was really useful for him to then attach the muzzle. So I'm thinking of a little potato head dude looking up. Looking up and to the left. The center line would be here, and I would see a little bit of the bottom, and so I'm gonna make sure that the center line wraps around the bottom. Right, and that already implies that we're seeing the bottom and this person's looking up. I can further support that idea with a kind of a rubber band around the sides. And this usually, to me, implies the brow ridge. Some people use the level of the eyes. Either way, it doesn't matter. The point is, a line wrapping around the top here to the ears can indicate if someone's looking up or down. Since this person is looking up, we're gonna be seeing a cross contour like this. Maybe even more curvy down here than I implied. And now these two lines make it way easier for me to place my features. I got my nose pointing up. The ears are gonna be lower down here. Let's say that was the eye line. So I'll just place the eyes there and the mouth directly below that. And now I got a little potato head dude. I can keep thinking of all the forms going down as little blobs. So the neck attaches to this. Since we're looking up at it, we're gonna see it attach right along there. And even the torso could be a blob form. If you're drawing cartoon characters, blobs is really all you need. I mean, unless they're hard surface like little robots, then we go back to boxes. Now, what about twisting? So center lines are useful, but something that might trick us a little bit is when our center lines twist. Like if this person was twisting, that center line isn't as simple as a C-curve anymore. Like in this guy, sure, center line will just do this. But what if we have a torso? Say we have torso that looks like this. There's the top, there's the bottom, simple bean shape. What if this side faces this way, but this side faces this way? Well, the center line here is gonna be over here, but the center line here is going this way. And so we have to show an S-curve. And you can reinforce this with the proper overlaps too. And the way I imagine these is that if this side is going this way, we're gonna see the side plane here. And so I'm thinking, oh, okay, so this side is somewhere on the inside, and then it becomes the contour. So I have to overlap it this way. Over here, if I'm seeing the front and I'm gonna see the side over here, well, then it the side has to go and become the contour here. So that's if we're looking directly at it. What about a twist from the side? Like if we were looking at this person from side view, and this is actually something that happens very frequently with really dynamic poses, is like you'll have this side twisting towards us, but it actually twists away from us on the other side, just like this. And we'll see kind of the butt and the back. Levels of simplicity. Cross contour lines can represent a simplified version of the form, and they usually do. Cross contour lines don't have to follow all the hills and ditches of the details. For example, on a face, we rarely go over the nose and the lips, just a curve for the simplified version of the head. How much to simplify? That's up to you as the artist. I like to strike a balance between keeping it simple, but not losing any important details. Remember what happens when we oversimplify a banana. It also depends on the purpose. Quick sketches or the initial stages of a drawing can be oversimplified because that's the point. I can draw an arm as a cylinder at first because I know that later on in the drawing, after I have the gesture and the proportions figured out, I can come back in and figure out the smaller forms within. But even as I put in those smaller forms, I'm still considering that major form that those details will conform to. The cross contours of the muscles still need to feel like they're wrapping around a cylindrical arm. A common mistake is to forget about that major form and flatten it with the details. Shading with cross contour lines? So shading is coming up in the next section of this course. We're gonna learn a lot about shading, but having a good understanding of cross contour lines is gonna come in handy. When I do detailed shading, I'm usually pulling my strokes across the form. So the shading isn't just about the tones, but how I can use my shading lines to describe the 3D form. When done effectively, these cross-contour based shading lines can create an amazingly powerful illusion of depth. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.